Well, hello there, David Taylor or Mr. Pelargonium back with another video for the Pelargonium and Geranium Society. Today I thought I'd look at perhaps some of the more unconventional cuttings. So let's just get going. Hello there, well, welcome back to the channel. Now last week I spoke about zonal cuttings, heel cuttings, which often have a little bit of root even starting to get going on them now. When we look at scented leaf varieties, Regals, Angels, Uniques, that type of Pelargonium, they are a little bit more complicated because they don't throw sort of what we saw, I suppose we call intermediate root bound growth, which you can break off and effectively just stick in the soil and let it grow away. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately, with these types of plants. So we have to search out the cutting material, made a little bit more complicated, of course, by the fact that these types of Pelargonium, they actually flower and grow on a separate stem. Now, at this time of year, in midsummer, the main sort of flowering period for those, particularly Regals, has tended to sort of move over a bit. It's gone over a little bit to a certain extent, and they now want to think about growing again. So that is good now, because from this period, I'm filming this mid-July, Tuesday the 16th today, they are beginning to throw a little bit of what we call normal growth and non-flowering shoots, which is actually really good for cuttings. You still will need to sort of separate them out a bit, and you may even need to sort of cut the flowering stem off. Now I've got a couple of examples. I've got a lady Plymouth here and a golden clarinda over there, which is quite a giant beast. It's quite a young plant, so it's growing away like crazy. Actually, I only got that this year, actually earlier in the season. This one is a slightly older plant. It's been outside, actually. I've just brought it in. So it's sort of toughened up a little bit being outside, and we've had really poor weather during July. Absolutely poured down with rain yesterday. So this is quite damp. But in a way, you want that. It's not a problem. It's supposedly meant to be turning hotter, actually, in the next couple of days. So this will go back outside and it'll dry and heal without any problem at this time of year. But I'm basically wanting to get some insurances, really, because, as I said last week, we've got our impending move coming up, and I want to get a couple. Lady Plymouth is one of my favourite scented leaf varieties, old established variety. And I want to get some insurance by getting a couple of cuttings off this. And indeed this golden clarinda, which looks as if it's going to be a stunning plant. So I will be doing that to a number of my sort of Regals, Scented and those types of plants, which we basically take cuttings in the same way for all of those. Right, so I'm just cleaning up my knife. Now, one of the things that we've got to establish, we've still got a fair number of flower stems here, and you can quite clearly see these. These are a bit longer. If I just sort of pull that one down, this is a really good example. Thinner, a slightly thinner sort of stem, bit long to the first umbel, which is the little flower stem there. But you've got this long sort of nondescript stem, and this is purely based for flowering, and we certainly do not want to use that as cutting material. But there, just below it, we've got this sort of good growth stem, and we're starting to see that a bit more now on all of these Scenteds and Regals and those types of plants that are going to start thinking about growing a bit more and flowering a bit less. Now, so what I'm really looking for is one that I can nick off without misshaping the plant too much. Now, you can see this is a little bit sort of long and not so wide there. So I'm going to concentrate on looking at the edges, and should be able to find an example of being able to cut a slice off without affecting the shape of the plant too much. So let's have a look at over this side. I think I can go down quite deep on this particular one here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to have a look to see where that's ended up. Now, we've got a supplementary shoot growing out there anyway. So this here, I'm going to take this whole branch off because it needs a bit of a shape up anyway. So I might as well just cut that off. So slightly, the wood is just slightly hardening on that actually. It's quite an old section, and there it is. Now here, we can clearly see on here, got lots of side breaks coming. These are proper growth nodes, but we got one little flower stem growing out the top. So what I will almost certainly do is nick that off, and we will use the base of this, which has had a flower stem that's broken off, as the base of the cutting. So we'll take that one off and we'll use that, making that a bit untidy. I'm giving it, that's a flower stem. Purely all long flower. So you've got a long break there, another flower stem, another flower would have come out of there, and the bloom there just breaking out the top. So that's a flower stem, that can be chucked. I'm just doing now a bit of incidental shaping. You want to look really for stocky growth, and that's why this one in particular is good, because it's very short jointed. By the time we've taken that flower stem out, it's going to be a nice chunky solid break to be able to use as a good cutting. Yeah, now this is quite good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to nick this one out. Now this is quite a good one as well. Here we've got the flower stem. We've got a nice nodal growth stem there, and you can clearly see the difference. It's much more compact, unlike this one, which has got the line, the long sort of, weakish thin stem going to bloom, another bloom coming out there. But this one coming out from there is nice and short jointed and ready to grow on. We can use the base of that as the base of the cutting. We've actually got another growth stem coming out there, which proves that would be ideal for cutting off there as a cutting. We'll take that off. We've got that distance really to be able to put in the compost, so that one's fine as well. Right, now what I'm going to firstly do, we do need to do a little bit of cutting back here. These are all little growth nodes, so this really is prime and ready for growing on. We've got another one that side. I'm just going to nick that off. Take that one off. I mean, these are quite chunky. You want them chunky, I suppose that's a good description of them. That's far enough. Now what I'm going to do now is take that flower stem off, and there we are. And that's what we're going to be left with here. Just going to take those stipules off, give this a little bit of a cut and shape now. Just below, literally a millimetre below that joint there, and that's fine. Now the one thing you've got obviously there is a monumental amount of growth hormone. This is quite a small cutting, this particular one, but it'll do well. Now the one main difference between taking zonal cuttings and taking regal cuttings is that I do use a hormone rooting powder with basically non-zonal cuttings. So I just use one that I've had here, a Vitax one that I've had for years. And I'm just going to wrap that in there like that. Knock off all the excess, and that's fine. So that one's done. This one is a little bit bigger. Probably a slightly easier example to show you. It's all of the same plant. I will give my knife a little bit of a wipe. There we go. Right, so what I'm going to do first is get rid of this lower growth break. Little insect there of some description. And this is the base node that we're going to use for the cutting. And I'm just going to cut the flower stem off. Now you can clearly see the difference. Very short jointed and chunky, that's growth. This is long, lanky and got blooms coming out of it. And that is clearly a flower stem. So just carefully trim that off. You'll have to use a knife for it. And then all of the growth can emanate from these two little leaves that are here. You'll get shoots and breaks coming out of all those joints as it grows. So there we are. That's that one just sort of tidied up. I'll just tidy up that little, quite a large stem there where the where that flower umbel was coming out. And you can clearly see the line. You need to go just below that line there. You can clearly see the line where the node is broken from. So just below there, about a millimetre or so. A little bit of a tidy up. I like to sort of just sharpen mine marginally so they go down into the compost a bit easier. Now I can probably get rid of that leaf. Take that leaf off. Let's again give that a little bit of a tidy down. There we are, a couple of little stipules which I'll just take off. And there it is. That's an ideal little cutting for Lady Plymouth. And there's another one. And I'm going to dunk that in the old hormone rooting. And there we are, two Lady Plymouths. Right, now another big one that I've got is this golden clarinda. And I'm just bringing this over. This is a young plant that really does need to be stopped. And so this is one of the reasons why I want to get a cutting from it, primarily because it does need a stop down because it's got huge. Right, now this is fairly similar. If I turn it round, this, on this stem here, we had a really, really large flower stem coming right up here, and I chopped that off yesterday because I wanted that to thoroughly heal, primarily because it was really, really big. And this is clearly a growth stem growing on here. We got another one down there. I'm going to go there. Right, so let's clean the knife because we've got a different plant here. And I'm going to take this just below here. There it snap, big cutting, there we go. That's that one, so there we are, that's that. Now, I don't know whether I'm going to be able to get one the other side. I may be able to, but I will do that. There we are, that one's snapped. Don't even barely need to cut them. I will. Okay, so that's the base of that. A little bit uneven now, but could argue that I could cut that down to there, but I'll wait for it to heal and we'll see how that develops. Could always stop it further down the line just to give it a bit of a shape up. Right, now this one here is fairly straightforward. Just need to be careful when pulling back the leaves. I'm just going to cut that off. I don't want to overstress this stem. I'm cutting off a leaf joint there. Nice and tidy. Clearly see where the actual node and joint is. We'll talk a little bit about what I'm going to do with that in a moment. But first off, let's do the slice. You can clearly see the line of the node, just a millimetre or two lower than that. We'll dunk that in the old rooting. Knock it off. Right, now a slight difference with this one. We've got this giant leaf here. Now, what I often do with a giant leaf like this is just cut it down. I don't want to lose it all because there's not much leaf here to sort of maintain it. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to cut some of this off. And you can do that. What's remaining will still sort of effectively breathe for the plant, but I'm just going to take that down so it doesn't sort of weigh it down too much, and that's fine. That'll sort of heal. You can cut it off once it all begins to grow, then you can lose that, get rid of it, but that'll still sort of keep that little cutting going during its initial young life. So that's that one done, golden clarinda. Now this other one has got a more developed leaf there, but we've got the flower shoot coming out. So what we're going to do, we're going to nick out that flower shoot. There we are, so that's that one nicked off. That can go all together. These leaves are just huge. That one is not so big. I will keep that, I think that's fine. Get that off there. And again, you can clearly see the line of that cut. There we are, all done. Slightly tidy it up. Dunk in the rooting. Right, so on 4 pots, 4 of my little 2-inch pots that I use for cuttings. Got a relatively sort of just slightly damp mix of the my sort of standard compost that I'm using here at this stage. Very free draining, as is always the way. At least 1/3 of drainage in your compost material there. I don't differentiate, as I said in the other video, for zonals. Just firm it down to a certain extent. That's quite important. Right, so I've just generally been just sort of faffing on a bit, just writing labels and that. So these, what little wounds there are other than the base of the cutting, have just sort of sealed off now. So we can just put these in. One of the main differences with this type of cutting though, for the scented Regals, Angels, Uniques, that type of thing, is that they take much longer to root. There's no sort of hint of root beginning to come out of the break or anything like that. These are much more conventional type cuttings. And these types of plants do take longer to root, probably up to a month. And this is why I really do need to get on with these now, because we'll hopefully be moving in around about a month's time. So I'm really wanting to get these done now to move them on so that they're potentially pretty stable by the time that we move. So there we are. Right, just ramming that down. It's one of the Lady Plymouths. Put that down in. Firm the compost round. Got the 2 Lady Plymouth labels. The other thing as well is that this compost is damp, but I will not water these until I'm almost certain that the compost is almost bone dry. They don't need it. They're going to take quite a while to root. They'll be okay. They'll look a little bit limp, particularly these fleshy ones. These will look a little bit limp, in the next sort of 2 to 3 weeks. But once they begin to show a little bit of willing of thinking about rooting, they'll perk up. Until that time, just don't go over watering. Don't be tempted to go too mad. Otherwise, you could just rot the cutting off. Different to the zonals last week, which of course had a little bit of base root already beginning to grow, and they will be really trying to search out the moisture. Unlike these, which are really quite different. So there's a few things to consider there. Okay, so there we are. That's cuttings of the other types of Pelargonium, really. We did zonals last week, and these are the remaining types of Pelargonium, which more or less this covers all of the other types, including with the Angels, the Uniques, and the other types of Pelargonium, other than the zonal hybrids. So there we go, that's those done. I'm actually going to now film another video, so I'll be seeing you again probably not too long after this one. So in the meantime, look after yourselves, and it's goodbye from me for now.